So hello Achiever, today I am in a new place, it's awesome. I am in a western maybe, and I am with Jim Britt. I'm sure you know him. He's a keynote speaker and he reached over than 1 million people in seminars. He had written 12 bestseller books and he has been named as a top 20 world success coaches. And he is with me, just next to me. Hello Jim.
Hey.
How are you?
Nice to see you. Good, David.
I'll let you to introduce yourself. You will do better than me.
Well, what would you like to know?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, I have a lot of questions to ask you. I have to choose.
I could start by telling a little bit about my background and how I.
Yeah, I would love to know your journey, your journey, and especially your struggles and how you overcame it.
Okay.
And
Well,
how did you become a top leader?
A lot of people ask me, how did you plan and get to where you are? You know, what steps did you take to do what you do? And my answer is I don't really know. It kind of happened, over time. I started out, my first job was picking cotton, and if you've ever seen people picking cotton, it's a very hard job. It's backbreaking, and I was 6 years old, and the whole family worked in the fields, and I did that until I was about 12 during the season. And you come home with bloody hands, and it's hard work. And you got paid 2 cents a pound, and cotton doesn't weigh very much, so you had to work hard for very little. And so I learned at an early age that working hard was not going to get you anywhere. Working hard or long hours wasn't necessarily going to get you anywhere. And then, the next thing I did was about halfway through high school in the 10th grade, I decided I had enough schooling, so I dropped out of school and didn't finish high school, didn't go to college. So I had no formal training of any kind. And looking back on it, I think that maybe that was a blessing, because sometimes you go to college and you get a degree and you get kind of pigeonholed into this is who you are. You're a doctor, or you're a engineer, or you're whatever, and you can't think outside that because you've been so educated in that field. So I didn't have the education, so I didn't know where to go. So my next job was, I got married at 18 years old, had my first child at 19, and I worked in a gas station pumping gas for about a year and a half, and I worked 60 hours a week, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week for $1 an hour.
Wow.
And so I took home about $52 a week, and I didn't know but what I'd stay there the rest of my life. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't have any direction. And I knew a lot of jobs required degrees and required at least a high school diploma. And I'd always thought about working in the factory down the street, paid a little bit more, you worked inside. And one day somebody from the factory, a supervisor there, came in, got gas, and started talking to me. And long story short, I got hired in the factory, even though I didn't have a diploma, because I had kind of a connection to get me in there. And so I went to $1.67 an hour and worked 40 hours a week. So I still made about $50 a week. And so again, I learned that, both of those jobs were hard work, or monotonous work on the factory, on an assembly line, doing the same thing over and over and over. And it reminded me of picking cotton, doing the same thing over and over and over. And so, again, I learned that working hard, working long hours is not going to get you anywhere. And my life changed when one night, about midnight, I was working what's called a swing shift. You get off at 12:30 a.m., work from 4 in the afternoon to 12:30. And about midnight, a guy tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I was going to work there the rest of my life. And I said, I don't know. I'm 22 years old. I didn't, He says, come go to this meeting with me. He said, I think it's something we could do to make some money and on the side. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, I don't know. I'm going, no, I'm not taking my night off and going to a meeting with you. And he begged me over and over and over. And finally, he said the magic word. He said, if you go to the meeting with me, I'll buy the beer afterwards. I'm going, you're on. So I took my night off and went to the meeting with him for the beer, not for the meeting. And I didn't know what to expect. I just was in a hurry for it to be over so we could go drink some beer. And I sat through the first half of the meeting, and it was a cleaning product, a line of cleaning products. And I'm going, I don't see any interest here. I don't know how you make money doing this. And then the next speaker gets up and talks about how you make the money. And about halfway through his presentation, man, I sat up and I'm going, I can do this, you know, I can do this. And I kept telling myself I can do this over and over and over. And eventually, before the meeting was over, about 20 minutes into his presentation, I decided I was not only could I do it, but I was going to do it, and I was going to get rich doing it. And it was a business opportunity, and you could start with $3, $300, or $4,000. I had $9 in the bank. That was going to be gone by Friday. I had no savings. I had no equity. I had no way to borrow money. None of my family, all of them had less money than I did. All my friends were in the same boat I was in, working in a factory. So there's no way for me to come up with anything, even $300. I didn't have it. And I could do the $3. But when the guy comes back to me and said, "You want to get started in our business?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "What level?" I said, "The $4,000 level." And as I'm saying it, I'm going, how are you going to come up with that money? I mean, my mind's going like this. But I committed to it. And I thought actually I could go to my bank and borrow it. And so I went to the bank the next morning and they turned me down. I threatened to move my $9 to another bank, and that didn't faze them either. And then I went to another bank and another bank. And long story short, I went to 23 banks and loan companies before the last one took a chance on me and loaned me the money.
Wow.
And over the next 12 months, I don't even know how I lived, but I lost everything. Both my vehicles had been repoed. All of my furniture had been repoed. My home had already been foreclosed. I had a notice on the door from the sheriff saying, "You got to be out in 5 days," by order of the sheriff. And I had no place to go. I had no money. I had nothing. And but I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't quit. And I knew I was going to get rich in that business. And as a result of it, of me not quitting, it was like the next 5 days before I was on the street, it was like a series of miracles happened. First one was somebody from the company came and visited and taught me what I was doing wrong, because nobody had ever trained me. I was just blindly going out trying to build my business. And he gave me a handful of things that I need to do every day. And if I do those things, I'll make money.
What is it?
And if I don't do them, I won't make money. And
what was this advice?
well, one of the major things, a lot of them are related specifically to that business, but he says, once you've decided what you want, he said, everything you do from that point forward is going to move you toward that or away from it. And he says, once you've decided what you want, he said, you need to focus on helping other people within your group get what they want. Because if you can make them successful, your success is automatic. So that clicked with me. And the very next month, I made $2,500, which was back then a lot of money. I mean, that was not quite a year's wages at the factory. You know, $2,500 was a lot of money. And during that 5 days too, I had another opportunity presented to me that provided me with a car to drive, a 3-bedroom apartment furnished to live in, $300 a week in my pocket, and I took it, not knowing if I could even do it. And so during that 5-day period, I had everything I needed. You know, I had somebody taught me what to do in the business. Somebody gave me a car to drive. Somebody gave me a place to live. Somebody gave me furniture where to live, and I made $2,500. I mean, and then the next month I made $6,000. The next month I made over $12,000. Within 6 months I was making $40,000 a month, and by the end of that year, from the time the notice was on my door, I had just under $1 million in the bank. So it can happen pretty fast. And so, you know, what I learned from that is that once you've decided what you want, I mean, it needs to be a decision that's so strong that there's no option. And that's the way I was. I didn't have an option. I would not go back to the factory. I was not going to go back and pump gas, and certainly wasn't going to go back and pick cotton. So I knew that there was no option. So I just kept moving forward, and as a result of it, it happened. And you know, looking back, I learned a lot of things. A couple of years ago, I did interviews with 12 self-made millionaires, mega millionaires, and one billionaire. And as I'm listening to these 12 people, to qualify for the interview, they have to have started with nothing, just like I did. I mean, nothing or below nothing. A couple of them were homeless before they started, different things. And they all were worth, mega millions. And as I'm listening to them in the interviews, I discovered that we all had the same traits in common. Cool. Like a half a dozen traits that I believe.
What was these traits? I love that.
Yeah, if you I'll give them to you. If you follow these, in my opinion, you cannot not be successful financially. But you can also use these same traits to accomplish anything you want. You know, it could be losing weight, getting healthy.
You can change your focus.
You use the same traits for anything, having a better relationship, excelling in your business, excelling financially. You can use it to accomplish anything you want in your life. And most people have used it to a degree, they just don't know they're using it, and they use it to a lesser degree instead of a greater degree. So if you want to accomplish big things, it's so much easier than accomplishing small things. It's like I was coaching somebody yesterday, and he said, I'm broke. I don't know what to do. And he said, it's just draining me. I said, of course it will. I said, being broke is so much harder than making money. I said, so why do you choose being broke? I said, because you got to struggle. You use your mental energy all the time. You're trying to figure things out. You're trying to pay the bills. And I said, you're focused on all of that. And then you just keep creating the same thing. So you got to change your focus. If you want to do well financially, you got to change your focus. So first thing that I discovered was the first trait is if you want to change, and these are simple things, if you want to change, you have to have a desire to change.
Yeah.
Now, it may sound simple, and most people have a desire. I had a desire when I picked cotton. I had a desire when I worked in the factory. I wanted something better. Everybody does. Most people anyway, unless, even people living on the street, some of those want something better. Some have gone so far down that they can't feel anymore, so they don't think outside of the grocery cart that they're living with their belongings. But most people do have a desire to change. The problem is, though, you hear an interview like this, you get the 6 traits that you need. You go to an event, you go hear Tony Robbins, you go hear somebody that's going to motivate you to accomplish more. And you spend 2 days, and you get revved up, you get excited about changing your life. You've promised your significant other if you go that this is going to be the answer, and when you come back, you're going, I've got the answers. We're going to get rich. Might as well go buy the new house, get the new car. Let's get a yacht. Because I've got all the answers. So you've kind of triggered that desire, and then you can't sleep that night when you get home. You're so excited. Can't wait for Monday morning, and then you get up Monday morning, and you do nothing. You go static. Go back into your old ways, because the pain of implementing what you just learned is greater in your mind than staying where you are. You're going, I've got to take a risk. It's like one person I was coaching. He said, so what's the one thing negative that pops up all the time? He said, I complain a lot. I said, why? Because I don't want to take responsibility and I don't want to take a risk. So I said, you'd rather complain so you justify why you're not doing well. He said, yeah. See, so that desire to change sinks back into doing nothing, so you don't feel the pain of having to stretch and grow. So, but you have to have the desire. So that's step number 1. And step number 2 is you have to make a decision that doesn't allow for anything less. So if you want to be wealthy, for example, that doesn't allow for a mediocrity. If you want to be a thin person, that doesn't allow for being fat, because you made a decision to be a thin person. If you smoke cigarettes and you want to quit, you don't say, I want to quit. You say, I am no longer a smoker. I'm a non-smoker, which rules out smoking. But if you're trying to quit, that doesn't rule it out. You see, you got to make that decision, and that's how people change. And we all do it, but we don't do it intentionally. And that decision has to be so firm that there's no option, because success and failure, wealthy and poor, wealthy and mediocrity, those are both decisions. So if you say, I made a decision to be wealthy, but I ended up being mediocre. No, you made a decision to experience mediocrity, because it's a series of decisions that changes you. You say, I'm going to be a millionaire. Then your mind goes, how are you going to do it? And you're going, I don't know how to do it. And you're already off track. You're already over here, you know? So it's got to be so firm that you have no other option. There's no other option. You can't sink back in and say, I'm just going to go get a job. I remember having that thought one time going through a struggle. I'm just going to go get a job. And about 5 minutes later, I'm going, no, I'm not. I can't, you know? So, and I've had times, you know, during years where I lost a lot of money and businesses, and everything almost went upside down. And you know, you just look at it and you spend about a day thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And then get up the next morning and you hit it, and you recreate it. And that's what people do. That's what successful people do. You know, that's what people are committed to things do. They get the job done, you know, and if they don't know what to do, they just keep going until they figure it out. Or go get some counseling someplace, you know, some mentor, somebody that knows more than they do. A good friend of mine used to say that your income is the average of the 5 people you hang around the most.
Yeah, I love that.
That's powerful when you think about it. So
I love that because I I used to be with millionaire.
Yeah. Well, think about it. If you want to make $100,000 a year, and you're making 35, and everybody around you is making 35, and that's all your friends, and you do everything that they do, and you hang around them, what do you think your chances of making 100 is? I mean, unless you break out of that, there's not much chance, because you're getting input. But now if you start stepping up, and you know, I've made it a point I've got at least 5 billionaire friends, so I've made it a point to have rich friends. I like to hang around them, you know, see what they know, you know, because, you know, I'm not a billionaire, but you know what, I can learn from them. So you got to be open and hang around where it's better. So, but you got to make that decision. And the problem most people have is they make the decision and they let their mind take over and go to work on them. They don't make a firm decision that doesn't allow for retreat. That's the key. Because the first thing that most people think is, how do I do that? I want to be wealthy. Okay, how do I do that? That doesn't matter.
I take the commitment. I will.
Once the commitment is there, you'll figure out how. But if you try to figure out how before you make the commitment, you're focused on the wrong thing. It's like setting a goal. I haven't written down a goal for 35 years. And the reason is because it doesn't work. I mean, why do you need to write it down? You're going to forget it? You know? So here's what I do. I make the decision that I'm going to do something. Now the goal is the steps in between. You know, the steps in between, like I want to be, you know, a famous author. Okay, well then the first step is to write a book. Second step is to do some promotion and, you know, right on through, find a publisher or whatever you're going to do. So, but a lot of people try to figure it out before they make the decision. No, you make the decision, then figure it out, because the answers will come to you. You know, a lot of people apply or try to apply what's known as the law of attraction, and that doesn't really work. And actually, scientifically, through quantum physics, you can prove that it can't work. There's no way it can work. But a lot of people still think it does. And they think if they make the decision to have something, they're going to attract the things to them that's going to fulfill that decision. When in reality, what happens is when you make the decision to have something, your view of the world changes. You know, opportunities that you didn't see before because you didn't need those opportunities. because you haven't made a decision to have it. So once you've made the decision, your view changes, and the view people have of you changes. That's how you accomplish things. You take action. You know, if the law of attraction worked, then I could decide to have a hamburger, and it would appear on my table here, along with a soda and a French fries. You know, and but if people would say, well, that's not realistic. Well, neither is the law of attraction. You know, so and I used to teach law of attraction until I discovered some things about it a few years ago that really doesn't work. And if you ask, in fact, I have many times, 300, 400, 500 people in the room, how many of you believe in it? All the hands go up. Then I ask, how many of you can actually say that it's worked for you? And almost never get hands raised. A few here and there. But then when you question them,
they take actions.
It's really all about the decision. So decision is so powerful once you have it, because it determines how you show up. It determines how people show up for you, or you show up for people. It determines your mindset. It determines everything. You know, without that, you got nothing. So that's the second trait, is that wealthy people make decisions, and they don't. I mean, they will change them if something's not working, of course, but they're not going to jump around. I see people going from business to business to business, and they're in 10 businesses at one time. That's okay if you've made one of them work, and you go to another one, make that one work, go to another and make that. But if you're trying to do all 10 at once,
you're a crazy dog.
And it's usually out of fear they're doing that, because they can't get one to work, because they haven't decided. They've made a whole bunch of little decisions that mean nothing, you know. So you got to focus.
It's easier to do a little more, few little decisions than take one decision and follow that.
Yeah. See, they think those little decisions are getting them there, but if they haven't made the big decision as a foundation, then the little ones don't mean anything.
Yeah, so I would love to know the third trait of successful people.
Okay. Well, as we said, the first two is having the desire to change and making a decision to change. And the third and fourth kind of tie together, but the third one, if you notice that successful people are very bold people. They're willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. They're willing to step up and say, you know, if you look at the tallest building in the world in Dubai, it's just over a half a mile high. So for somebody to step up and go, I'm going to build a building that's a half a mile high, I'm going, are you kidding me? You know, but they did, and it's standing. You know, but you got to be bold. You got to step up and do things. I mean, not reckless, but bold, because in this world, there's people that will run over you if if you're not. You just got to get out there and get it done. And my philosophy is simply this: say yes, figure out how. Say yes and figure out how. If you see an opportunity that you think would make you money, or whatever it is you want, say yes, this is what I'm going to do, then figure it out. And that's what happened with my second opportunity that year. During that year that I made all the money, I got introduced to a new opportunity that came out of nowhere. I went and delivered a 5-gallon container of carpet shampoo to a customer that owned an apartment complex, and that 5-gallon delivery is what got me the next opportunity. Yeah. And it came out of nowhere, you know. And the opportunity was to build to be the foreman and run a construction site to build a 52-unit apartment complex from scratch. I mean, from the ground up. And all I had was the blueprints and nothing else. The problem was, I didn't know how to do it. I'd never built anything before. I worked on a construction site cleaning up during 1 year in my freshman year of high school for this guy. And I would do little repairs, stuff like that. So he thought I was, pretty good, pretty smart. And I did do a few things, but I learned by watching other people do it. I didn't really know how to do it. Certainly didn't know how to build a 52-unit apartment complex. But you know what? I built it, and it's still standing. You know? And I said yes, and I figured it out. And I didn't tell them until 10 years later that I didn't know what I was doing. But you know how I figured it out? I figured, well, you get on the phone, you call a construction company, and I said, I'm going to build a 52-unit apartment complex. What do I need to do first? They go, well, you need the property. Well, I've already got the property. Well, you need to have the plans. I've got the plans. You need a permit. I've got the permit. Okay, where do I go now? And they would give me 2 or 3 things that I needed to do. And then they'd start saying, well, when can we come out and meet? I'd hang up on them and call the next one and say, and then I'd start with this one left off. And I learned from that. And I also learned that the building inspector will kind of keep you on track too. They won't let you put a roof on before the walls are upright. So, but I built it in record time. I built 52 units in 8 months, and they gave me a year to build it. And there were some big bonuses and things in there. And so the philosophy is, you know, don't try to figure things out. Say yes. And that's bold when you do that. When I said yes, I'll do it. You know, part of it was desperation because I needed money, I needed a place to live, I needed a vehicle to drive. But part of it was I'm willing to say yes and figure it out. You know, I started a chain of health clinics years ago. And guy told me that he had already tried it and he failed. He said, I've had one in San Francisco, exactly what you're trying to do. And he said, I got $1,600 in volume in 1 year. And I said, well, obviously you don't know how to get the people in the door, and I do. But I didn't, for sure. I just thought I did. Well, that turned into 26 clinics across the country, and all very successful. You know? So, you know, you've got to be bold if you're gonna get ahead in life. And that ties into the next component, the next trait, is you've got to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. Because here you are, and here's your comfort zone, and out here someplace is the things that you want. Yeah. And you can't get out of there without stepping across that line someplace. And again, people look at the pain of change, but anything you do, whatever it is, I don't care if it's lifting weights in the gym, you got to push yourself. My greatest fear was getting up in front of people and speaking.
Yeah, we talk about that just after.
Yeah,
I love
it. It was the biggest fear I had. I was terrified. I mean, would be a better word for it, terror, and I didn't want to do it. But I pushed myself and I forced myself. And during a 5-year period, I put the word out to my salespeople that I would go do speeches for them to sell tickets to seminars, and I did to the tune of about 3 a day for about 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, I was still terrified. But every time I would speak to a group, I would walk out, get by myself, and I would ask myself, how did I do it? How could I have done it better? Until one day, I walked into a group in Park City, Utah, about 400 people in the room.
Wow. And
my thought was, when I walked in the doors, instead of being nervous like I usually was, I said, let me at them. And so now I'm no longer nervous, and that's been years and years ago. But I know speakers today that's been speaking for 25 years. It's still nervous when they get up and speak. But I got to the point where I understood what caused that and how to eliminate it. And you know, but
and how can we eliminate the stress when we
well, there's 2 things that we're looking to do when you get up in front of an audience. Number 1 is you want their approval, and when you need their approval, you get none.
Yeah, that's.
And the other thing is we want to control. We want to kind of control the audience, and when you need control, you're out of control. So what happens is when you're trying to control, you're coming from here. You're manipulating. You're trying to think about, how could I control the audience? I'll tell a big joke. I'll do this to get the audience moving, and I want them to like me too. So I got to do things to make them like me. So it's kind of a combination of control and approval. But if you let go of the need for control, you're in control, and you start speaking from here versus here. If you let go of the need for approval, you get approval because you're speaking from here. So those 2 things really govern most negativity that you're experiencing in your life. Everything really that's not working in your life culminates back to those two things: the need for approval or control.
So you have to are constantly looking for the opportunities to do something that you don't know.
Yeah.
To grow.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you're doing, if you're in a business, whatever it is, and you look in that business like I did in the speaking business, and I was in the business of promoting seminars initially, and so my greatest fear was speaking. So I had to confront that in order to make progress and move ahead. So that's really what you got to do. And almost every business is like that. You know, you've got a fear of doing something. Well, you need to confront that and get it done. That way you'll move past it. So that's the fourth thing, is stepping out of your comfort zone. Successful entrepreneurs, wealthy people, take action.
It's the fifth step?
Yeah, fifth step. You got to take action. Nothing happens without action. Nothing. So you got to move on it. And a lot of people will spend all their time getting ready. Well, I can't do it yet. I don't have my business cards printed, or I don't have my this or that taking place, or I don't have my business plan. No, take action on what you can take action on now, and figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
Because in today's world, if you spend too much time figuring things out before you take action, somebody else will take action in front of you, and you'll be second.
I had
or
the
third
idea.
place. Yeah, you think you've got the idea. Somebody else has got it already. They just haven't taken action on it yet, but they will. So, but you have to do that. And when you take action, of course, you get confronted with your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Again, and when that comes up in your face and you feel that fear.
It was amazing the first time I did an interview in English for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was terrified. It was by Skype, and I was terrified to do that in English.
A fear of stepping out of that comfort zone is really, fear is your imagination making up an experience of what's going to happen in the future. It's not real.
Yeah, it's in your head.
But it's also based upon past experiences. So you're bringing the past into the present and trying to figure out how you can not have to confront it. When in reality, the point I'm going to bring up next is probably the most important point of all. And most people don't consciously know they do this, but some people do it. We all do it to a degree. But I was on a panel with several entrepreneurs at a big event, and I was asked, what's the one thing that you've learned and applied in your life that's been the most life-changing, the most beneficial to you in your life and your career? And I didn't even have to think. I mean, it was like right there in 1 second. I said, learning to let go. Learning to let go. And then I went on to explain that, but letting go is like letting go of fear. You can confront it and push against it, or you can recognize what it is. And what happens is, and this is really critical for success. I have a whole program called The Power of Letting Go, and it's powerful. But one of the concepts is that we get caught in what I call an addictive cycle. And we're actually addicted to who we are and what we have and the experiences that we're going through. And because we believe that that's who we are. So the way that works is you start out with an experience. So you grow up poor, or you grow up in an abusive family, or you grow up with an alcoholic parent, or whatever. So that creates experiences for you. And some are good, some are bad. So the good experiences are, the ones you want to keep. The good addictions you want to keep. And people say, well, am I really addicted? I said, yeah. If you get up in the morning, every morning, and you have to figure out how to put your pants on, you pick them up and you go, now, well, how do I do this? It'd be a little inconvenient. Or if you try to figure out which hand to brush your teeth with, it'd be a little inconvenient. Or you get in your car and you go, now how do I drive this thing? What's this for? That's the key. Where do I put it? No, that's all addictions that we have.
Yeah.
But positive ones, you put the key in, you turn it on, you're off and running. We don't have to think about it. We drive down the road, we don't even think about it anymore. We know how to keep it between the lines because we're addicted to that. It's a habit that we've developed, if you want to look at it that way. But there's so many of them that are negative because an experience creates a feeling. So it goes in a cycle. You got the experience, maybe it's a traumatic experience that happened to you in your life. Maybe you were abandoned, maybe your parents died, maybe you lost all your money, maybe, whatever. Or it could be a series of little experiences that every time you experience that, you start to feel that. And you don't like the feeling, so you stuff it, push it down. And a feeling influences how you think about yourself, how you think about the world. It's hard to make money, it's hard to keep relationships together because my parents didn't, or I saw my mother, married 5 times or whatever, all of those things are feelings that cause you to think. And as you start to think in those terms, you start to believe that. You start to believe it to be true. And a belief is something, the interesting thing about a belief is that all of them are false. None of them are true. It's something that you've decided is true.
Yeah.
And people say, well, I've got a class for 2 days on how to change a belief. Well, you can change it in 30 seconds. Why spend 2 days? Make up something new. You made up that belief, make up something new. It's like a path in a field. If you look at that path, it's a beaten path because you've been on it every day of your life, over and over and over. And you think, I don't know how to get off this path because over here it's tall grass and something might bite me, But I tell you what, if you move on a different path and you walk it a few times, pretty soon you got a path over here and that one's growing over. So see, that's where the decision comes in. So a decision is a belief. You make the decision and that changes what direction you're going. Instead of going through all the mental gymnastics of trying to change a belief, just make up something new. They're all false anyway, it's just something you've decided is true. But the belief is something that we unconsciously will defend to the death in some cases. We will defend what we believe in, just like if the person believes that money's hard to earn and he can't get out of this trap and he'd rather complain instead, then that complaining is the justification for not changing the belief. And it's also the justification that money is hard to get. Money's hard to earn. That's why I complain. So I complain because money's hard to earn, and money's hard to earn because I complain. See, it's a catch-22. And then the belief influences how you behave. It influences your actions, basically. Because if you believe it's hard to get, you will make sure that you don't get it. You'll fight to the death defending that belief that money's hard to get. And you start listening to people when they talk and they come up with some justification. The economy's bad. The world is mean and ugly, whatever it is, nobody has any money, all of that stuff is justifications based upon what you believe. But there's people getting wealthy in a bad economy. So why? It's because they believe they can, and they take action accordingly. And if you believe you can't, you'll take action accordingly. And so the action will create a result, like proving to yourself and people that you know around you that what you believe is true.
Yeah.
And the result creates an emotion that feeds the original experience. So it goes in this cycle. You go experience, feeling, thinking, belief, action, result, emotion, back to the original experience. So you just keep going in that cycle over and over and over. And it actually releases neuropeptides in your brain, just like being addicted to a drug. It's no different. A drug addict says, I know this is bad for me. I'm going to quit. So they quit. And then something happens that triggers their emotions, and they say, well, just a little shot of heroin. This is the last time, though. And they do it. Or because they're addicted. Doesn't mean they can't stop if they make a decision to. It just means that they won't stop until they make a decision to. So everybody's addicted to something. Some people are addicted to success, to the point that they're unhappy. So it's looking at all of these addictions because that addiction becomes just like a drug addiction. You're going, no, this time I'm going to be successful. But the old belief creeps in and goes, no, you're not, because you're caught in that cycle. So learning to let go, and the two things that we just talked about, the need for approval and need to be in control, those two things really is kind of the beginning point to breaking that cycle. There's so many other ways to break it. I mentioned in the beginning that every action you take is going to move you toward what you want or further away. It's another way to break it. You make choices. You become more observant of yourself, and you observe what action you're about to take. And is it something that's going to move me toward what I want? Now, if you haven't decided what you want, it doesn't matter what action you take, because you're just going to stay in that cycle. But if you want to get out of it, you got to decide, and then you got to observe yourself and make sure that the actions you're taking, and action could be a thought, a feeling, an emotion, a behavior. Any of those things could be an action, a belief that you have that's holding you there. I'd say challenge those beliefs.
Yeah.
Challenge them and say, how did I come to believe this? Who taught me to believe this? What if they didn't know? What if it's not true? And more importantly, who would I be without this belief? Who could I be without it? See, that's critical.
Yeah. So there are 5 traits. Do you have other traits?
6 traits.
Okay.
So desire, decision, be bold, step out of your comfort zone, take action, and learn to let go. Those things. If something hasn't worked, a friend of mine, he passed away recently at about 84 years old, and I knew him from the time he was about 65 to 84. And he lost a couple $1 million, his only $2 million, he lost with some scam in one of the Virgin Islands where they built some condos. So he lost all of his money. And every time you talked to him, every time you met with him, every time you saw him, every time anybody saw him, that's all he talked about, was how much money he lost. And he would be so much further ahead if he hadn't lost that money. See, that went on for 19 years. And if he'd have just let that go and moved on, he probably would have lived longer, for one thing, and certainly would have made more money, but he was always broke. And the reason he was broke was because they took him for his money. But that's what people do sometimes. They just stay in that cycle and don't break out. And it leads them right back around in the same circle over and over and over.
Yeah.
So it's a conscious thing, just being conscious of what you're doing. But you can use those same 6 things to accomplish anything you want.
Everything,
Somebody says, well, I want to lose 50 pounds. Okay. You got a desire to do it, make a decision to do it. You got to be bold and do things that you don't normally do. You got to step out of your comfort zone, maybe do some juicing or whatever.
Right.
You got to let go of your old things. You got to take action. All of those things, whatever you want in life. If you apply those 6 things, you'll have it. If you don't, you won't. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take a look at anything that didn't work for you, you pick out one of those things that you didn't do. I guarantee it. If you look at what's worked for you in your life, you'll see those 6 things right there. Everyone.
Yeah, I love your 6 traits. It was a very huge answer. And I would love to know what, for example, I do speeches,
Mm-hmm.
and I will do speeches in English. So let's consider I work with you. What could be your advices to be very powerful in doing speeches and sales?
Well, you've got to. I think one of the things that I learned in an early stage was that what people were looking for, what they're going through. So people, there's only about a half a dozen problems in the whole world that people have. Now, your problem you probably think is unique to you. My problem I think is unique to me. But in reality, whatever problem I'm experiencing, there's about 1 billion people experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
It might be lack of money, it might be a broken relationship, it might be some spiritual thing. There's only a handful of problems. And so once you understand that and you make a presentation, the thing you want to do is connect with your audience. So you're always asking yourself, how do I connect? You connect from here. And you don't connect from here. So if you spend too much time planning and rehearsing and You know, I was on a speaker group in LinkedIn recently, and a lady says, "How do I get rid of this nervousness? I've rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed." I said, "Stop rehearsing and just get up and talk." "Well, what do I say first?" I said, "It'll come to you. Just get up and talk." I said, "Of course you want to know what you're going to talk about, but," I said, "you know, rehearsing is mental." I said, you've got to connect with people from here. And a lot of it is learning to tell your story. Learn to tell where you came from. You know, Tony tells his story. He learned to tell his story back when we used to tell him to tell your story. And, you know, when you tell your story, you've got to connect with people. When people hear my story, they go, wow, if you can do it, I can do it. You know, I mean, and that's what you want, whatever your story is, you know, learn to tell it. And if you've got 30 minutes to speak, you got to tell it in 2 or 3 minutes. If you've got a day to speak, you tell it in 15 or 20 minutes, you know, or 30 minutes, you know. You can lengthen it out. You can do different things with it. But knowing your story and knowing how
So
to...
you can, do you think you can connect with people in 2 minutes in telling your story?
You can, yeah.
Yeah. I
I
would
mean,
love
it's more difficult. You know, I do a
What
lot of...
what do you say, for example, for you in 3 minutes about your story?
Well, I might just say, you know, I grew up in poverty pretty much. I mean, we didn't have much money. I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, but, you know, early in life I picked cotton. Anybody ever pick cotton? You know, and you know, and then I graduated from there to a gas station pumping gas. Had no place to go, no education, no business background. Worked hard, but working hard wasn't getting me anywhere. And people in the audience now are going, wow, he came from that, and here's where he is, and I work hard, and I'm not getting anywhere. So, see, they're identifying. The key is what I call identification. If you look at your speech like it's a football field, the first step is identification, and that takes you up to the 40-yard line. But before that, they're not on the field. They're out here someplace. So when they identify with you and go, he's just like me. Yeah, I can identify with that. Wow, he went through that. I thought maybe he started out with a silver spoon in his mouth or whatever, you know, but he went through that. So you can tell it quickly, but you have to know that what people want is they want to connect with you. They're saying right up front, why should I listen to you? You know, there's when you get up front, if they don't know who you are, there's 2 things they don't care about. They don't care about you. They don't care about what you're about to sell them. But they will if you do the right identification. If you identify with them and get them on the playing field, get them to say, he's just like me, or yeah, I can buy that. So you plant that, and that's where what I learned.
So you can talk about you only if you show parallel between you and
exactly.
them.
You want to show a parallel. You want to make sure, because if you get up and just talk about you and it's just words and it doesn't connect, then that's empty words that have no value. So one of my philosophies and keys to speaking is, if it's not necessary to say, then it's necessary not to say. So
but
if it doesn't have a meaning, if it doesn't have an impact. Jim Rohn taught me when I went to Jim and I said, how do I become a good speaker? And he said, well, yeah, he said, you got to have something you're passionate about. You got to have topics you're passionate about. And he said, find 2 or 3 topics that you're passionate about and go study those. Go figure them out. Go learn how to talk about them. He said, tell your story. He said, tell me your story. And I did, and it took me about 30 seconds. And he said, okay, that's 30 seconds. You got to develop that. You got to get it to where you can tell it in 15 minutes, in 2 minutes. And he said, but become a gatherer of stories. I said, where do I gather stories? He said, everywhere. He said, your kids. He said, you learn from your kids. You learn from other people. You learn from, just like the guy I coached. That's a story, you know. He didn't want to take responsibility. He didn't want to take a risk. He'd rather complain. And that's a story.
Do you write every day or every week maybe these stories?
No, I just remember them, you know. That story that came from yesterday. And he said, gather them, they're fresh, some of them are old story. I could stand up for 2 days and tell stories. That's all I have to do, and all real stories, just like this guy. So telling that story, do you think anybody could relate to that?
Yeah.
Say, how many people are not willing to take a risk or take responsibility and would rather complain? There's somebody listening right now that would rather, that will see themselves in that little comment. And that's
Yeah.
what you're trying to do, is connect it where you're pushing their buttons.
The beginning of your speech. What do you do?
I might get up and say, have any of you ever thought about how you ended up where you are? Positive or negative? Have you ever really thought about it? Really looked at yourself and ended up where you are? Well, I recently did, and let me tell you a little bit about where I came from. And then I go back and I tell my story. And then by that time, I've captured the audience. I know that I've captured everybody in the audience. And now they're ready to listen to me because they want to know what I know. So that's the key, is you gotta capture your audience. Not try to control them, not try to get their approval. Just tell your story, tell a real story, and come from here. I mean, I see people in the audience with tears running down their cheek while I'm telling my story, so I know that it connects, So it's got to be real. You can't just make something up, I heard a guy one time up front speaking, telling my story. Now, you think he's effective? No, he was telling my story. So it's a compliment that he copied me, but on the other hand, it wasn't his story.
Do you have a good proportion between your own story, for example, I did that, and the story of the people you know? It is your stories, but for example, do you understand what I mean?
Blend. I'll do a blend, depending again on the audience and what comes up at the time. I may think of a story of something that one of my workshop attendees went through, and how we worked through that, and what they were experiencing, and how we got through that. So we may use a story like that. But stories are powerful because what I do is you make a point, tell a story, or you tell a story and make a point, one or the other. Because if you just make a point, and never tell a story, they may not remember the points. But if you tell a story, they'll remember the story. And they'll remember the point based on the story. So that makes it interesting. But you don't want to make your story too long. You want to get to the point, How does that support what you just told them?
Great.
I'll go, and here's the end result of letting go. For example, a lady that went through one of my courses, this, and tell that story. So it's powerful.
Yeah, it is. How do you prepare a speech?
Sometimes I don't. I just get up and start talking.
Because you know your topic.
Yeah, and I may think, well, I'm gonna talk about the power of letting go. So that may be all I know that I'm going to talk about. And I get up and I start and I just get into it because I know it so well. And I might talk about the addictive cycle. I might talk about something totally different. I might lead the audience through a letting go process or something like that. But initially, what I did was, if you're going to prepare a speech or an all-day seminar, it's kind of like writing a book. When you write a book, you've got, let's say, 12 chapters. Well, what are those chapters about? Well, I'm going to write about, this and this and this and this and this. So you got your topics. And what are you going to put within those chapters? Well, I'm going to do these 6 things within that chapter and these 12 things within that chapter. So those are the subtopics of that chapter. And it's the same way with a talk. You can get up and go, okay, I'm going to talk about desire, stepping out of your comfort zone, that type of thing. You're going to talk about these 5 or 6 things. And then you may have subtopics, or you may just let it wing it and see what comes to your mind when you're up there talking about it.
Great, I love that. So Jim, I have a serious question for you.
Okay.
I have a mission. And do you have some advices, some tips to become a loser? And I would like to become unhappy in this life. How can I become?
I would say probably the first step is that you become who you hang around. So I would look for some other losers to hang around.
Yeah.
And listen to them, because you can learn from them. I mean, even wealthy people can learn from losers. Watch what they do and don't do it. But hang around, and then don't make decisions.
No decisions.
No decisions. Don't make any decisions. Just let your life kind of glide through and have no purpose, no passion. Don't look to help anybody. Just be yourself and
just focus on
register a
myself.
website called lowselfesteem.com and
I can build
and
this
post
website.
post all your complaints on there about your life and how
It's
life
very
is.
inspiring because I will inspire other losers.
Yeah. No, the losers are great. They're examples. You know.
Thank you very much. I will try that.